Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ProgCast. I'm Gregg Bendian, and today I am really pleased to be joined by someone that I view to be an elder statesman of jazz, and he is a pianist, a composer, an arranger. He's an author. He's a music conceptualist. And I was very happy to spend several hours with our guest about a couple of years ago in his home discussing his life for the oral history of American music at Yale. And we really got into some concepts there. So I know today we're going to get into some areas as well. But he's with me today, and I'm so pleased to welcome Hal Galper. Hi, Hal.
How you doing, man? Good to see you.
Nice to see you. You're looking well.
Oh, man, well, feel like $100.
Yeah, all right. We'll take that. In the current economy, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. No, I'm okay. We've been, as of April, we'll have sheltered in place for a year. So,
right. That's right.
Yeah. But all is well. We're holding on. Luckily, I have a big house. You saw it.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of privacy.
Beautiful Victorian.
Yeah. We have a lot of privacy if we need it,
Well, it's good because we have a similar situation in New Jersey where I am, and there's a quiet and there's a sort of presence of nature. I think it's such a big part of staying together as a creative person, as a sensitive person.
Yeah. So what's on your mind today?
I have a few questions for you, Hal Galper. You're a very interesting figure in the music, and I know a bit about your different projects, and so it's difficult for me to choose where to start. But there's been a sort of through line in a bunch of these podcasts that I've been doing recently with certain interesting cats that I don't think get talked about enough. And I know that you had some contact with Jackie Byard.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I had 18 lessons with him. This was, he was teaching he wasn't part of Berkeley at the time, but I had 18 lessons with him. My first lesson, he had a little studio down the street from Berkeley. And my first lesson was very stimulating. And then as I was leaving, there were two doors I had to choose from to leave. I'd never been to his place before. So I was leaving and I opened up a door and all these scores of Jackie's, it was a closet full of his scores. They all came spilling out. String quartets, brass strings, amazing stuff that he had written that probably nobody ever played. So I started off being embarrassed right away with Jackie, but he was a great guy. I had 18 lessons with him, and I learned the most from him of any teacher I had. And the funny thing was, when I went back and looked at my notebooks, I didn't have anything in them. I had no notes because the way he taught, and I kind of borrowed his technique. The way he taught was he got you excited. He got your brain going. And when you left his place, you were thinking about all kinds of stuff that you never thought about before. And of course, you're thinking Jackie showed it to you, but actually you're asking the questions yourself. What he did was he swung you. He'd get on the drums. He could play any instrument. He'd get on the drums, or he'd play alto or tenor or whatever. And they'd show me a couple of voicings and this and that. Nothing really coordinated. It was all at the moment. But boy, I left his lessons like thinking he had taught me all kinds of stuff. But really, he had just stimulated my mind. So I use that technique now when I'm teaching. I try to get my students excited and stimulated, and so that they leave the lesson, thinking, getting their brain going.
It's so important to be dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the best teachers are what do they call them now? charismatic teachers. My teachers, the masters, they were all charismatic, and they all had awe. And that's a basic ingredient of a master. You're not going to respect them unless you consider them awesome. And they have. I was thinking back I was doing another interview, and I don't know if I mentioned it the last time. I don't think I ever initiated a conversation with any of the masters that I played with. I waited for them to say something, because they were on another level. How come there were so many levels above me. How could anything I could be interested in relate to anything they're interested in, because they're on another level. So I think that's probably one of the most important aspects is your master has to have awe. You're not going to learn anything. You're not going to respect them until they've beaten you up. You know what I mean? And all the masters I had, they did that. They did that for sure. So,
Hal, did you know that I played in Cecil Taylor's trio for a while?
No, I didn't know that.
No, I guess I never.
What do you play?
I'm a drummer.
Oh.
Yeah, percussionist.
Uh-huh.
So in the late 80s, I had been a fan of his since I was a teenager. And in the late 80s, early 80s, I was studying with Andrew Cyril and Steve McCall. I was getting inside the music. And then, going to all the concerts and really feeling like the direction was to go. Well, you've heard my trio. I know that. We talked about the conception of rhythm that we both share an interest in, and the idea of rubato and the idea of metric modulation. Well, Cecil Taylor was aware of the Carter stuff. He was aware of advanced rhythmic stuff that came from contemporary classical, not necessarily from jazz. And he was very comfortable with me being influenced by contemporary percussion, as well as being interested in the free jazz thing. So this idea of having it seemingly free in terms of rhythm, but in other ways being really worked on in terms of perception, hearing of rhythm, imposing durations in different ways on the rhythm, right? It could be a clave as a sort of an imposed durational structure.
Yes.
Or it could be freely associating with a group of pitches. All of these levels of free, I know you've explored them, and my generation then has been influenced by the way you guys have conceptualized and continue to this day, because I want to also talk with you about forward motion. Okay, but to this case, do you feel that your group, and I heard a great recording today of Rapunzel's Luncheonette. I think it's a great example of what we're talking about, wouldn't you say?
In what way? In what manner?
In the way that the freedom to rhythm is approached, but it's approached and people are listening, and you have multiple subdivisions of rhythm going on in a trio.
Right. The question being,
do you feel like that is something that you have made a central concept in your music, and where did it come from?
Well, that's a good question, and I think I have an answer for it. I don't practice very much unless I have a specific musical goal in mind. So I avoid practicing. I do everything I can to avoid practicing all day long until it gets to be about midnight, and I watch the TV shows. I've read something. I'm listening to some music.
Always? Were you always that way?
Yeah. So I guess to be around midnight, I'm sitting there. Well, what do I do now? I thought, let me go play the piano. So I don't do that until I run out of every possible excuse to avoid practicing. Yeah. So I'm at the piano one night, and I started playing, and this came up. And I thought, gee, this feels right. But I'm not going to ever find anybody to play this with me. You know, it's a long story. I don't know if I can make it short or not. So I called Tony Marino, who was with me recording the first rubato album I did, which is really nice. Tony Marino and Billy Mintz. So I called Tony and we did a duo gig at the Deerhead Inn in Delaware Water Gap. And it was an elderly crowd. I was really concerned that this would be, nobody would like it. Of course, Tony is a free player in bebopper's clothing, and he can do anything you put in front of him. You know, he's like symphony level bass player. So we played this duo, and the people liked it, you know. And Tony was right there with me. He was a great follower, you know. So I was surprised, but at the time I'm thinking I'll never find a drummer to be able to play this music with me. But I had heard Billy Mintz on one of Jeff Johnson's, my bass player's recordings. And Billy was in New York, so I called Billy. And we played together, and it was just perfect match. Just perfect. I didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to tell anybody anything. So I got into it. But then after a while, I realized, you know, I had always played this way because I get bored real easy when I'm playing. And if I get bored, whenever I get bored, I take it out. And I've always done it, but not as a thing in itself. You know,
it's always been an option.
Yeah, yeah. And I generally use it when I get really bored and I just say, fuck it, you know, and go out. But I kept my place, you know. So
and you don't go willy-nilly, but going out means what?
Well, playing rubato, keeping the tempo, playing and going outside harmonically and rhythmically, subdividing, superimposing them, you know, the whole thing. So that's how it came about, you know. It's like by accident. And you know, I thought back, you know, I was hanging out with Richie Byron years ago, maybe in the 60s, at his loft, and he was one of the few piano players that we could, you know, get together and exchange ideas and stuff, you know. So I played some broken time lines, and he got all excited and he said, "Hal, that's your shit, man. That's your shit." You know, I said, I said, nah, you know.
Really?
Yeah. That was like in the 60s, you know.
That's interesting. Wow, because early free playing, like you got to decide what are you going to do, right? And especially piano players, you have a lot of control. I think horn players were really up against the issue. Or are they going to go squeaky bonk? Or are they going to play some like Jimmy Lyons would be like such a post-Bird player, you know? He wasn't that kind of player. But there was so many interesting choices that were being made at that time. And you're a great example of a person who never decided that there was one thing was better than another was better than another.
Right.
And that you wanted all the options.
Yes. But I never considered it as a thing in itself, you know.
It's an element.
Yeah. But that one night when I first started to play it, you know, and I didn't know exactly, I couldn't really define what I was doing really well. I actually, it's the old oral tradition technique, the music taught me. And the more we played it with Jeff and John, with my trio, the music took us. We didn't impose ourselves on it. We didn't play with intention. We just tried to keep ourselves open and see where the music took us. And we finally reached the height of that with Origin Revisited, that album. We've all snapped into the zone immediately on that album. And that was quite a change for us. The thing was, we would take a break. We'd be on the road and we'd take a couple of months off and we'd come back and we didn't start off where we left off. We were ahead of where we left off when we started up. I can't explain it, you know. But it really took us for a trip, you know. Perfect example of one of the aspects of the oral tradition and how it works, which is something I'm working on now. It's very difficult. It's been a very difficult article for me because I wasn't sure how to approach it, but now I've got a good idea how to. I'm really such a firm believer in the oral tradition, the apprenticeship system, and the fact that it should be included in curriculum, but the curriculum isn't set up that way, and it could be a part of the curriculum, except those who are invested in teaching information as opposed to process. You can't self-process. You can't make money from process. You can from information, you know. So it was having trust in your intuition was the bottom line. You know, a lot of musicians don't trust it. They're afraid to let go of their ego and let it happen. But I think we all trusted our intuitions. That's the machine that we use to play anyway. You know, so you have to gain confidence in your ability to just jump off the ledge, you know.
John McLaughlin said to me, I just try to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And let it happen.
Yeah, get out of the way of yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
And that zone that you mentioned, I know that you've written about it, and it's a very important concept, something that has been throughout my life, being somewhat at one hand DVD, but also DVD, yeah, ADD, but also hyper focused, and having that ability to go from a teenager to go into the zone. And that became a part of practice. It became a part of listening to music, experiencing art throughout my whole life. And then it became a very useful tool in creating from nothing and from no assumptions, and to be able to play free.
Right.
And when I played with the guys where it was free, I found that it was free, but it was cool if you used your vocabulary. It was cool if you had your language and you're putting your language into space with the other people. And there was a collaboration to it. There was some meeting to it, right? Isn't that the fun of it?
Yes, but I always felt that the free music at that period lacked. I didn't sense the concern, a willingness to communicate to an audience. I thought it was very self-involved, and I think you know, we're kind of talking about presentation here.
That's interesting.
And you have to consider, nobody teaches presentation anymore. They don't even think about it. But presentation is the aspect that involves the audience. You basically were kind of like psychologists, and we're trying to hook up emotionally both audience and artist vulnerable and get that thing going, you know. Pull me back. I kind of.
How do you feel that Tony Williams came across to audiences?
Oh, he killed, always.
But in his most wild phase, were you interested in what he was doing with groups like Lifetime?
Well, he asked me to join the band.
When?
Well, we were recording Now Hear This, and what's his name? His organ player just passed away, and Tony asked me. You know, we came up together.
Yes, I know. That's why I wanted reference.
Yeah, Tony asked me to join his group, but it had to be on electric piano, and I had made a commitment never to play another electric keyboard again. So
your last electric stuff was with Cannonball?
Yep.
That was the final?
Yep.
Interesting. So did you so dislike the electric instrument in Cannonball's group?
Well, I liked it. Look, when I was playing with Stan Getz before that, I was playing electric piano, and I was using I forget who, I was on tour with Donald Byrd somewhere, way back when, down south at a college. And there was a funk band there called Coke. And the leader of the band, we hung out on intermission. He said, Hal, you want to hear a sound with the Fender Rhodes? He says, get a Leslie organ speaker. So I got one. I found one cheap, and I got one. And this was before they invented the phase shifter. So that was a great sound. And you can hear it on Wild Bird and Gorilla Band. That's what I'm using.
Oh, wow. That's hip. That's so hip.
Yeah.
Because you were the one that did that. Chick wasn't doing that, right? Chick had the roto sound. Chick had, what did he have? And Keith.
Suitcase mono here, I think.
Oh, right. But everyone was processing the electric piano. Jan was processing the electric piano. So, but the feel of it was better than, say, a Wurlitzer, right?
Yeah. Although these days, I kind of enjoy the sound of that Wurlitzer. When it was ugly, I used to be ugly, but now it's not so ugly. It's charming,
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. But so I was into it when I was with Stan. What I came to the realization was that I was not happy with the state of my chops, and I could play easier on the electric piano. So I realized after Cannonball, I said, man, don't bullshit yourself. You're avoiding playing the piano and your responsibility to your instrument. This I'm talking to myself now. And I had to make a commitment. I thought, I've got to look, I should be able to get anything out of the acoustic piano I can get out of the electric piano. I just got to work harder to get it, So I had to make a commitment to playing acoustic and not get away from it, because I had to get my chops together, I was not comfortable. It was I hadn't been working enough to get them together in the early days, and not practicing enough and all that stuff. So I really had to get back and honor my instrument, if you will, and accept responsibility for it and do the work, So I went into the shed, and that's when I was working on the pentatonics. So that time, and that's when Now Hear This came out. That's probably one of the better pentatonic albums I made. I think the two with Schofield, I was at my best in terms. I had finally worked it out, not just played patterns, but actually played melodic phrases,
That's interesting. I want to talk about that period, but could we talk about the Cannonball period just a little bit before we move on?
Sure.
I'm really kind of in a really tender spot with Love, Sex, and the Zodiac. It speaks to such a time in my childhood where that was the thing, and what's your sign, and the Zodiac, and following your horoscope, and that's so built into it. Did you have fun making that record? Because you have 2 tunes on that record.
Yeah, I do. I have a real nice bossa nova. Unfortunately, on that record, I had to give up like a lot of my publishing rights. The Rick Holmes was involved and all that. So all the other tunes I recorded with Cannonball, I maintained control over. But a really nice bossa nova that was on there. And then there was a nice funk thing, But what happened was we made up the stuff in the studio. And we do, one of the tracks is a free track, So we're playing, we stopped playing free, and it's this great free track. So when it was over, Cannon says, you want to play that back? And the guy in the studio said, oh, I thought you guys were just warming up. He didn't record it.
Oh.
So we had to do a second take. And you know how second takes are.
Yeah.
But we were making the stuff up. And I brought the bossa nova I had written before. The funk thing I almost made up on the spot,
Well, the bossa also has a really nice contrary motion thing going on.
Yeah.
In the what is it, the B of that?
Yeah. That beat got copied, and I made a lot of money for it, because a tribe called Quest. They took the rhythm from the van, and they made a song out of it, and I found out about it.
It's you see, that is a cool record for you. Nobody ever asked you about that record.
Well, yeah, right. I never talk about it.
That's interesting, Hal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had Walmart refused to. I forget, no, it wasn't Walmart. The stores, because of the cover, the stores didn't want it. It was a very salacious cover, you know.
Well, it was recorded in 70,
Yeah,
but it wasn't released until 1974.
yeah.
And it's sort of at the height of that whole era in a way, you know, before it switches over.
Well, the 70s were sorry. The 70s were a vital time, you know.
You can just wait. We'll edit that.
The 70s were a reaction to the 60s, the freedom of the 60s. Which gets to the point that I was going to make before we got onto this Cannonball thing. With presentation. Presentation has to do with to what degree do you control the music? What control factors are you employing to make the music sound logical? And I thought that was one of the weaknesses of the free movement in the beginning. There were all kinds of structures. I mean, with Sam, we used to play E anything.
Sam Rivers.
Yeah, we play E anything, you know. And then once we were done with that, I say, you know, Sam, what do you want to play next? He says, how about C anything? Okay, you know. So the structure there was one note, you know. But then you take it to the other end, where Wayne Shorter, in his early days, he actually wrote out for the cats the scales he wanted them to use to get a specific sound. So this control factor can be like almost 0 to maximum, you know. And I think that's one of the things that was missing in the early free music, and I think why I gravitated to the rubato thing, keeping the tempo as an organizing factor, you know. However, the rubato thing isn't, we don't listen to each other in terms of the rhythm. It's the harmony is a guide now, because what we're doing is we're stretching how long or not we want to play on each chord. So as long as we're keeping the rhythm and we can all hear the changes, we can do whatever we want, because we're letting the harmony be the guide, not the melody and not the rhythm. And of course, Jeff and John fell in with that just right away. And so I could do anything I wanted. It didn't make any difference with these guys, you know. They would follow me anywhere. I think the rubato had a little more impact because it was on tunes, you know, and it was in tempo, you know.
It seemed to me like that Tony Williams was an ideal drummer in the original moments of that sort of conception of rhythm. Is that
we were playing that way with Sam, you know. I was playing free on tunes before Sam came back to town.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I was playing free on tunes before Sam came back to Boston. And so when we hooked up, it was like, you know, love at first sight, you know. But a lot of people were having problems with me. John Neves walked off the bandstand one night in the middle of a tune, holding his ears, saying, "You're giving me a headache," you know.
From what you were playing?
Yeah, in the middle of a song.
What were you overplaying?
Probably. Or I was just playing free, you know, on tunes. I used to experiment. I experiment with getting lost. I loved getting lost. It opened everything up, and it was you just reacted to what you heard, you know. But it was another point of view, you know, another perception of the music it offered, you know. So I'm looking at as many possible conceptions that I can find, you know. And I mentioned that to Cannonball, and Nat said, "Well, don't do that on this band." You know?
So did Cannonball have a really great presentation?
Oh yeah, he had that done.
How many years did you work with him?
A little over 2 years, and I left about 9 months before I had a stroke.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was. I could see it was coming. I didn't want to be around. Yeah.
Did Cannonball get along with Phil Woods?
Yeah, of course. Phil just idolized him. Are you kidding? So, yeah, I had we played a club with Cannon in Philadelphia called Just Jazz, I think it was called.
Mhm.
Not sure. It was on the second floor. And we played there a week, and someone came and had recorded the whole week and sent me the cassettes. Phil loved Ken, and he went, and I lent him the whole week's worth, you know. And then he had the fire in his house, and they got all burnt up. And I thought, man, all of that is lost. But quite a few years later, the guy who had originally taped it contacted me, and I guess he had burned them all to CD, and he sent me the CDs. And now they're online, you know. So I found them online as well. A lot of the things are the tunes are listed on what I have and everything, so I can go over that someday. But I have all of that, and Phil just loved Cannonball, you know. So when I got the CDs, I let Phil. I downloaded them and sent them to Phil. Yeah.
Oh, great!
He loved it.
You know, I also did Phil's oral history for Yale.
Huh?
I also did Phil Wood's oral history for the Yale oral history.
Yeah.
Toward the end of his time, yeah.
Yeah.
He's an important figure in the music. But you know, Sam Rivers, I think, is someone that's not discussed enough. He's an interesting guy.
Very much so. He's a genius. He was way ahead of everyone. Miles couldn't make up his mind about it when he was playing with him. I heard Miles was going in the audience and asking people what they thought of Sam. You know. And Sam, unfortunately, he would be subject to stage fright. So when he was with Miles, he didn't sound like the way he played. You could look at the way he sounds on the quartet album we did, A New Conception, where he was really relaxed, you know. And then the way he played on the Japan recordings, you know, with Miles.
But let's talk about New Conception. That's really important. 1966 Blue Note, right?
Yeah.
So was it a New Conception, Hal Galper?
Yeah.
Which was what?
Playing free on tunes. We were just setting up, and we were playing free on tunes, and everybody. The reaction generally among our peers is that was kind of like the first instance of that happening. But what happened was that Tony took that concept and brought it to Miles's band, and that
is something that happened right at that time. You are so correct.
Yes. So that Sam's quartet invented it, and Tony brought it to Miles, and that's how it
sure did.
Yeah. And then
that's heavy.
Yeah.
Right, because the Massachusetts thing is no small thing, right?
No, it isn't. Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of stuff going on there.
Yeah. No jazz society in Boston, if you can imagine that. One of the most major, almost all of Duke's band was from Boston area. Woody Herman's band was almost all Boston cats for many years. Stan Kenton's band, I mean, it was a music town, you know, with Berkeley there, you know.
Yeah, I remember Riles.
Huh? Riles, yeah.
Riles?
I got some recordings of us at Riles.
Yeah, I played at Riles a few times.
And back to Sam, though, I've got a WGBH TV thing we did with Father O'Connor, where he plays just, you know, it's just beautiful, relaxed. You know, when he was relaxed, it was just phenomenal, you know. And
was he doing multiple reeds?
At once? Well, he played flute and soprano. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, was he playing flute and soprano?
Huh?
Anything other than flute and soprano?
And tenor sax. That was it.
Tenor, and
yeah. He was also a great piano player. It drove me nuts the way he played.
He was a good piano player, wasn't he?
Yeah. Drove me nuts. Hated him for that.
So what were his conceptions that sort of influenced you and vice versa?
Well, not so much that he influenced me. We were both the same. We both hated most everything we heard. We're terribly elitist, you know, picky, hypercritical, I mean, we were like as if we came out of. We didn't have to adjust to each other or anything. It's just two like minds. You know what I mean? It was like it fit together like cogs in a wheel. You know, there was never any problem with between Sam and I. We communicated beautifully. You know, it was my postgraduate work, 6 years.
And who else is on those bands?
Well, I started out with Tony, and then he left for New York, and then Peter Lippman played with us for quite a while. Chet's old drummer. Peter was an incredible drummer. What a beat he had. He's the one that taught me about gears, you know, using gears, because we would play Monday nights someplace at the stables. And I said, yeah, Peter, I can play 3 gears, up to 3 gears. He says, oh, no, Hal, there's 6 gears. I said, really? He said, yeah, I'll show you. So the next step, we got up there. We started in gear 1, you know, and then at the appropriate time, you know, we went to gear 2, you know, and then I was really working hard at that point. And then we went to gear 3, and I'm putting it all out, you know. Next thing I know, he's in gear 4. Pounding me into the ground. And then he goes to 5. My arms tightened up, my shoulders were up high, my arms were getting heavy, I was aching. And then he went up to 6, and I had to stop playing. I had to stop. I just couldn't do it.
There really are 6?
Yeah. Well, he did it. Yeah, he did it. He did it.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't play at that level. At least at that time, you know.
Could Rashid Ali?
Oh yeah, he had a big beat.
He could play there, right?
Oh man, he played exactly the way I heard it in my head when it came to rubato. Exactly the way I heard it. Anyway,
do you remember with him with Coltrane?
Yes, of course. Are you kidding? I recorded with Coltrane's rhythm section. Reggie Workman and Rashid Ali. You've got to be kidding.
No, I know that, but I'm wondering, when that stuff's happening with Coltrane, what is that in your consciousness of Coltrane going free, or to a lot of people saying he lost his way or maybe lost his mind? What was going on? Tell us at that time on the ground, Hal. Do you remember?
Well, yeah, I do. Well, you know, Alvin hated having Rashid there, and he left.
So you remember that transition?
Yeah. I thought it was great.
Did you see them together, by the way?
No. I only saw Coltrane for a second when I was hiding out in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia once. Don't ask.
Yeah.
But I did hear them in a club there for like a minute, and then I left. You know, I didn't really hear it. But my connection with it was at the time where I finally met him, and Reggie I'd known since the 60s. We used to play Bradley's duo at Bradley's when they had the Fender Rhodes there. Before
of course, yeah.
So we'd known each other a long time. But for that album that we did, the live album, I've been, up until that point, I've been doing a lot of Coltrane research because he never talked about how he practiced and what he worked on, you know. So I was trying to, he never talked about his playing, never. As far as
did you ever talk to Paul Jeffries about that?
No.
Because Paul practiced with him.
I didn't know that. Had I known, I would have.
Paul was my jazz director when I was a student at Rutgers in 82, 83.
Paul and I knew each other quite well.
Yeah, Paul was wonderful.
Anyway, that album artwork, that was my summation of the research I'd done on Coltrane. You know, I did find someone sent me a long 2-hour interview of Coltrane done in Denmark or something, and the guy who was interviewing was a real asshole. Spent the first half all talking about race, which Coltrane did not want to talk about. You know, he just wasn't that kind of guy. He was a very, very impressive person. As a man, very impressive. He had all. He was one of those giants. He was different, like Dizzy was different. And at the end, you know, the guy says, well, what are you working on these days? He says, well, not anything specific, but, you know, when I don't have anything specific to work on, I just work on, cells and shape. Bingo. My analysis was that's what he was working on. You know.
I think that you're right.
And so I got a chance to prove it with that album, you know. And
oh, that's so cool. And what was it like for you as a pianist listening to Alice Coltrane play that later period Coltrane?
I didn't, you know, I didn't get on that period. In that period, I didn't listen to him that much then. I wasn't that much interested in figuring him out. I had other stuff going on. So, and I'd already made my own decisions about free playing by that time, what it requires. And, you know, people told me if you keep up with this bravado shit, you're going to lose your audience, you know, and which they accused. What happened to Train, he lost half of his audience by the change into free music, but he got another new half, you know, of people.
Did he though?
Yeah, sold 100,000 pieces of A Love Supreme, 100,000 records. That was a while ago. It's probably more now, you know.
Right. Oh, yeah, no, it's a perennial.
Yeah.
But our records like Ascension or Interstellar Space or Expression, are they the same kind of sellers? I just wonder because you mentioned presentation, and when we came after you guys and things even got more conservative, we were just trying to go more personal and be more into what we were trying to do, because it didn't benefit to try to be part of any particular school. So when I talk about Paul Jeffries and the group coming out of Rutgers, that's Terrence Blanchard and the New Lions, or the Young Lions thing that I wasn't really interested in. I was interested in like Paul Motion. You know, so I came up in a period where the young guys were going more conservative and away from that. And you probably remember that moment where, you know, the major jazz labels were embracing the new traditional stuff.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But just that was also a disappointment for me, because I was more interested in a guy who I think it was a wonderful free player with multiple layers of rhythm, was Paul Motion.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Did you ever play with him?
Yeah. It's quite a story though. Bill Evans was at the Jazz Workshop in town, in Boston.
Okay.
2 weeks.
When?
I was there every night because I never really studied Bill. I stayed away from him because when I first heard him, I thought, Jesus, we're on the same track here. I kind of felt a similarity. I said, I'm staying away from him because everybody's going to think I was influenced by Bill Evans. They still do, but I never copied him, you know. It's just an inclinations were similar. So he was there 2 weeks. His hands were all messed up. He was shooting up in his fingers. He had 2 paralyzed fingers on his right hand. He played maybe 15 songs a set, short songs. And it was just, you know, stunning. Never made a mistake. The last set, he comes to me, he says, Hal, I'm out of stuff. I says, I gotta go cop, you know, can you play the last set for me? I said, sure, man. Oh my God. Never sit in for a master. It was Paul and Gary Peacock were playing.
Wow.
And they all knew me, right? So I started, I had been listening to Bill for 2 weeks. So his sound was in my head. I couldn't get it out. So when I started playing, I was sounding like somebody who was trying to sound like Bill. And the audience hated it, you know? And Paul says, Hal, in the middle of the song, he says, play your own shit, you know, play your own shit. I said, I'm trying. I couldn't get the animosity coming from the audience was just unbelievable. The lesson being never sung for a master.
And no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah, right. That was a horrible experience. But I knew Gary and Paul pretty well in the early days. Yeah.
But they're important in terms of, as a listener, I know coming up, we were listening to Gary Peacock with Eiler. We were listening to Paul with, his own thing, with his things with Keith, all these different important recordings.
Oh, yeah.
And they're all defining rhythm in their own ways.
Yeah.
And we kind of thought, oh, we should come up with our way of defining rhythm. So I always felt like when we played free, there'd always be some sense of a pulse, if only evident to me. But it would be something that would drive.
That was one of the control factors. And the presentation depends on how many control factors you want to use,
Speak to that.
Well, like I said, it could be one note. Like Sam, we used to do with Sam, we play E anything. Where in Phil's band, we had the chance to like work out the details on every arrangement. The arrangements always developed on the bandstand. So the way I look at it is we're in a good sense we're psychologists, and our job is to manipulate the audience emotionally. That's what they came for. They let themselves open. You should see my article on the social contract about the arrangement we make with the audience, the deal. They paid $10 to get in, and they pay for the privilege of letting their egos go, along with 100 other people in a safe situation. You're all doing it together, so it's safer. And we're doing the same thing, agreeing to be vulnerable, and they let us in, which is I consider a privilege. So there's when they pay that $10, they've made an agreement to let us fuck with them, basically. And that's what we're supposed to do, fuck with them emotionally. So presentation is for that. How do you want to emotionally affect your audience? What techniques do you want to use that, like I said, when I'm playing, I get bored real easy. And that's when I start messing things up, and playing free. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. What was your approach, though, when you work with great singers? Like you work with Joe Williams and Anita O'Day, Chet Baker.
Oh, you did the job. I learned how to clock from great singers.
Tell me about that.
Well, singers always sing the song the same way.
Do they? Did they? In the ones I just named?
That I knew, because the reason was you had to learn the way they sang it, and then you could make up your piano part. The drummer could make up his drum part. The bass player could make up his. So they sang it the same way all the time until you learned their phrasing, their spacing, their dynamics, and then the rhythm section had a chance to make up their parts of the arrangement. So that was kind of an ethic for vocalists, at least at that time.
So Joe Williams is in that camp?
All of them, yeah.
Anita O'Day?
Yeah. I worked with Jackie Paris and Anne Marie Moss for many, many years. They were incredible vocalists. And that's probably where I learned more. I sitting in with Sarah, I learned a lot with her. Jackie Paris was an incredible singer. Anne Marie Moss, incredible singer. You had to watch her left hand, because her left hand, people would think she was just making gestures in the air. It didn't have anything to do with anything. But you were watching her left hand for cues. She was directing the music. She had the mic in one hand, and the left hand would be doing, stuff like this. Or
what would those signals mean?
Play softer, slow down, or different things.
Would she bring in sections? Would she knew the arrangements?
No. What do you mean by that?
Was she conducting?
Yes. Yeah, and I found a lot of singers after that. You had to watch their left hands because they were giving you cues about what they wanted you to do. You know.
Okay, but what about your left hand? And this is what I mean. When you're on a gig with a singer, is it the job of the pianist to orchestrate?
Yes. Well, I thought so. Some people didn't. Um,
Who were your models for that?
for accompanying vocalists,
Yeah.
I didn't have any. I got because I didn't in my early days in Boston, didn't play with any singers hardly at all. So I didn't have that experience till I got to New York City, playing with really good vocalists, you know. And that's when I started to learn more, you know.
That's so cool.
I mean, there are great accompanists, Tommy Flanagan, you know, Hank Jones. Hank Jones is just incredible accompanist. You could there were a lot of good recordings you could use for, you know, resource, you know, how to comp. But I learned it under fire, you know.
You know, Philly Joe is such an interesting figure in the music, and I recently saw that you were a fan of his quote, that it's always been free. You're always free to play your
Right.
solo the way you wanted to.
Yeah.
And I've come across time and time again, like Sonny Rollins and you know, the older cats that were just fine with any particular approach to the music, any way that they could engage the audience. There was experimenting, obviously there was searching. You don't necessarily get that in pop music and rock music on the same level.
No, but that's how pop and rock music has a different function. So
yeah,
it's not the same. You know, jazz is supposed to stimulate something, and popular music is supposed to dull something.
Interesting.
That's my definition. Philly Joe was my favorite drummer. When playing with Chet, I got a chance to pick my own rhythm section after a while, because when Chet came back from Italy after serving he was in jail there in Italy. He was still the rhythm section. There was a revolution in the music. People were playing more on top of the beat. They weren't playing the laid back groove, which is my favorite groove.
Was it because of cocaine?
Huh?
Was it because of cocaine?
No.
Why was it? Where was it coming from? That energy?
Huh?
Why do you think that changed to be sort of hyper or on top of things like that?
I don't know. That was, you know, music reflects the culture of the moment. So you have to look at the culture to maybe come out with the answer for that. But we were playing at Shelley's Manhole, and Philly Joe came in and sat in. And I always wanted to play with Philly Joe. I couldn't wait. I was just hoping that maybe someday I'd ever get a chance to play with Philly Joe. So he came in. Steve Ellington was playing drums, and he sat in for a set. And here he was, 5 feet away from me to my right, swinging his ass off, giving me nothing. I was hoping that he'd kick my ass and I'd get to play great, you know, and I'd be able to match his level and all that shit. He knew that. He sensed it, that I was riding on his coattails, and he gave me nothing through the whole set. I couldn't believe it. No energy here. He was sitting 5 feet away from me, just swinging furiously, and I got nothing from him. Okay.
Did he look at you? He wouldn't look at you?
No, he didn't look at me. He didn't smile at me and nothing, you know. So I thought, geez, I really blew my chance with Philly Joe, you know. So years later, we're Cannonball, and we're playing just jazz in Philly. And I think this happened to me twice. We at Just Jazz. We played there a year apart with Cannon, and Philly Joe came and sat in, and Cannon played started playing blue and boogie without counting it off at like this tempo. Without count off. I got lost. I didn't know what the beat was. I was totally faking it through the whole tune. Philly Joe's not looking at me. He's not smiling. He's not giving me any help whatsoever. So my second shot with him, I blew. All right. A year later, he comes back. We played Just Jazz again. He comes in and Cannon counts off the blues. Nice medium tempo. Oh, No Greater Love. And there's a break at the end, you know, and I come in before Philly comes in and I lead him all the way through the tune. And he's smiling at me and looking at me and we're interacting. And he had been waiting for me to take charge and do my own thing instead of sitting on his coattails. That was amazing. I have a recording of it.
You do? Wow.
Yeah.
How do you have a recording of that?
Because I had all those bootlegs from those 2 gigs that I told you about that filmed.
How many shows is that?
2 sets a night for 2 weeks.
Geez, you have all of that transferred?
Yeah.
Fantastic, man.
Yeah.
That's important stuff.
That was my Philly Joe experience, you know.
So that's a lot of. So who else is on that band?
Walter Booker, Roy McCurdy, Nat, and Cannon. And Roy McCurdy was a perfect drummer. And they kicked my ass around for the first year. I was like a feather in a windstorm. Strongest rhythm section I ever played with, you know.
But you came in before or after George Duke?
After George Duke. It was Bobby Timmons was playing after George. When I auditioned, I was living in New York. Bobby Cranshaw recommended me to Nat. Nat said they were looking for a piano player. They were playing the Jazz Workshop in Boston. Funny, I'm living in New York. So they flew me up there. They had rented me a hotel room to come up and audition, and Bobby was there. And he was not, and Bobby and I were good friends. I loved his playing. We loved each other's playing music. And he was in really bad shape. He was drinking cheap Chianti wine and stuff. So I auditioned there, strangely, in my own hometown. And all my old quote unquote acquaintances, those who didn't think shit about me and never said anything to me, all of a sudden, hell yeah, man, you know, and I'm thinking, boy, you were jive then and you're jive now, you know, it doesn't make any difference that you like me now. So I got the gig, you know.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, we recently lost Lee Konitz. Did you have any time with him where you talked about musical concepts or time where you were just playing with Lee?
We played together 9 months, duo, at a club called Gregory's on 3rd Avenue and 69th Street.
Wow.
It was a small club. And then we went on the road and recorded Windows. We never talked about the music.
Never.
So
how was the material arrived at then?
For playing it.
So there were never a chart?
No, we were just playing tunes.
Playing tunes?
Yeah.
But tunes that would go free?
Well, no, but you would think it was, but we were playing in tempo all the time. Although it was always, I tell you this, he was the most fun duo player I ever played duo with, because it was always this close to falling apart, and it never did. It was just incredibly intense, you know. And I have just recently got some bootleg recordings of me and Lee at Gregory's in the 60s. Just got them last week. You know?
From where?
Gunther Schuler's son, George Schuler.
Oh, nice. George, right on.
Well, he's also got some Herb Pomeroy big band stuff with me.
Get George.
He just sent it to me. I haven't gone through it yet. That's some of the early 60s, the gray area in terms of recording, finding anything with me live on it. Yeah. So I haven't gone through those yet. He gave me copious notes on the tracks and all that stuff.
That's fantastic, Hal. That's important stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you work with Gunther Schuller at all?
No, I didn't even know him.
No?
No, I never met him. I wasn't really much into that third string thing, you know.
That didn't do anything for you? Why? Why not?
Bebop!
So you're like hard bopping and you don't want to know about that?
That's right.
Too dry? Too white?
Look, it was, it has to do with what catches your interest, you know.
What about Doffy's work there with Gunther?
I'm not familiar with it. I didn't spend that much time listening to third string. I was trying to learn bebop.
What did you think of Doffy?
He never convinced me.
Is that right?
I'm probably a majority of one on that, you know. But he never. It's not really good for you to ask me what I thought of different musicians.
Oh, because you said earlier that you and Sam didn't like anything.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I have a much better question for you. What is forward motion?
It also has to do with one of the bar. We're all taught backwards. And everybody thinks that ideas start on one of the bar. And you hear a lot of people who start their ideas on one of the bar. One of the, this was, you know, I've just been thinking about this because it's going to go in my, in the book. You're going to have to, I'm going to take a little diversion here, but you're going to have to remember where we were to bring it back, okay? So when I was going to Berkeley at 57 or 56, I remember walking down Newbury Street and I had two questions. Something about one, the one beat was a question mark. I thought something was going on with one I didn't know about. And God, now I can't think of the second one. The second question was, what am I supposed to be feeling inside when I'm playing? Now you have to understand, I didn't know anything in those days, nothing. So where did I get those two questions? I didn't have enough experience to have asked those two questions, but they were important questions. The question about one ended up being the book Forward Motion 25, 30 years later. And what's supposed to be going on inside ended up becoming process oriented. But I didn't know anything about these. So the question becomes, how could I have come up with this? So I've got a theory now that I've worked out that when we're born, and DNA has something to do with it, when we're born, we have a certain number of, all our neural receptors are dormant. And the environment stimulates these neural receptors. So, for instance, if you, I always tell my students, if you like a musician, it's not because you like him and that you're trying to play like him. You like the musician because he's trying to tell you something about you. My approach has been, art is supposed to teach you something about yourself or give you an experience you never had before. I mean, that's its function. So if you're listening to Miles a lot, right, it's because your neural receptors are tuned that way, okay? So here you are, not knowing anything. Here I am, not knowing anything, but my neural receptors, which have certain tendencies, shall we say, or predilections, but they're not filled in, they're not filled out, they're dormant until stimulation comes from the environment. So you hear Ahmad Jamal play, it sets off your Ahmad Jamal receptors, you know, and so you're attracted to it. And there's this mutual attraction going on. That's how I came up with those two questions. And that's how we learn. We all have these tendencies in these receptors. Why do you play the way you play as opposed to why do I play the way I play? No two people have the same receptors. No two people hear the same way. No two people think the same way. So, and
it is interesting how many people, let's say drummers, for instance, you hear and immediately feel who they are.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they're trying to tell you something. Case in point, like I said, I never studied Bill Evans. But in the year 2000, Todd Rundgren, who used to run the Keystone Corner, sent me 2 CD sets, Last Waltz and Consecration, 18 CDs of Bill Evans for 2 weeks at the Keystone Corner, 2 weeks before he died. 2 sets a night, 18 CDs. They were brutal. I spent the summer listening to him. I couldn't finish listening to him. I got through about 16 CDs. He was, Ahmad Jamal is my godfather as far as I'm concerned. But Bill knocked him off his chair on these CDs.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, I felt attracted to Bill. Now, I'd already come up with this idea that it's the stimulation from the outside stimulates the neural receptors, blah, blah, blah. And I felt Bill's trying to tell me something. When I feel that kind of a tug towards someone, I'm convinced that someone is trying to tell me something about me I didn't know. Okay, so I spent 3 years researching Bill, dissertations, transcriptions. I spoke with everybody I knew who played with him, everybody who hung with him, everybody I knew that took dope with him. To try to find out what it was that Bill was trying to tell me. So what I did is, he was dead at the time. What I did is I wrote a letter. I did this with Ahmad too, in order to organize my thought. I wrote a letter to Bill, and I ended up with 3 questions, that's another part of this. Anyway, finally, after going through all this stuff, I realized, okay, I'm not interested in Bill's line playing. I'm happy with my line playing, and I'm not interested in his rhythmic concept because I'm happy with my rhythmic concept. Then the bell went off. Oh, he's trying to tell me something, and it made me realize that a little voice in my head, starting probably in the time I left Phil, 1980, had been saying, Hal, your voicing suck. Doubled notes, not clear. He was telling me my voicing sucked and I had to get them together. And my little voice said, yes, that's true. And then I finally came to the conclusion that I found out he knew counterpoint. He had learned counterpoint. Berkeley never taught counterpoint, which I think is criminal. Okay.
They didn't?
No.
Oh, I had counterpoint at Rutgers, and it really was important to me.
Yeah. So, but the whole idea was, all notes in voicings have to move melodically, right? So, as a general rule.
Right. So you have general rules that you can use in any situation.
Yes. So, species counterpoint, they say it takes 7 years to learn. I didn't have time to learn that, but I could use the general concept. So I worked on that. I took a lot of notes out of my voicings. I could play 3-note voicings that sounded full, and getting the melodic motion going wherever I could, finding all these passing lines, all that stuff. That's what Bill was telling me I had to get together. And it took me 10 years to get it together.
Can I ask you, though, this is interesting to me because I always feel that, as I said earlier, pianists orchestrate. Mm-hmm. So is Bill responding to Debussy?
Yes.
On one level, at least?
Yeah. Bill, what was interesting about these recordings is he always played the same arrangements. And someone once asked Eddie Gomez, how come you play, how come you play the same arrangements all the time? He said, because when we play the arrangement.
But then are the solos open?
the solos are open, but they're all based on the arrangement.
So the form is set in terms of how many cycles anybody gets of anything,
No.
but you can cue out of it to go to this arrangement.
Everything is done in terms of the arrangement. That's the only thing I tell the musicians I play with. If there's an arrangement, we're playing the arrangement. If there's hits in it, if there's this or that in it, if there's a break, we're playing the arrangement. That's a control factor that makes the music communicate better.
Well, it's satisfying for the audience to know that there are control factors.
Exactly, and they can hear the tune clearer and stuff like that. So I think that's a really a stunning statement. It's about the concept is having a core idea. You have to have a core idea. That has to do with presentation as well. So the core idea in his trio was you play the arrangements.
And he would play short tunes. I'm producing a Bill Evans album for the Bottom Line Archive. And it's the 75 trio with Elliot Sigmund and Eddie Gomez. And it's a lot of tunes, and they're short and they're clearly arranged.
Yep.
But it's like, to me, what's interesting about that, Hal, is like it's almost like chamber jazz.
Yes, it depends on what period. I got to tell you, these 18 CDs, he was not playing it safe.
But he's still orchestrating, right?
All the time. And he never, in that letter, I had 3 questions, if I can remember what they were. The first one was, how much of what he did was worked out ahead of time, Yeah. Or second one was, did he just leave it up to intuition, and I forget what the third one is.
But did Eddie, do you talk to Eddie? You talk to the different people that were still alive?
Yeah. Not while he was alive, no. I would have asked Bill personally. He knew of my playing. He asked me to sub for him, for Christ's sake, But all these questions occurred after he had passed,
But I mean, did you ever ask the guys that were in the trio if they knew that it was this worked out arrangements?
Well, I didn't, but someone did. That's where I learned about that Eddie Gomez quote.
Yeah.
Oh, it's obvious it's worked out. You can hear it, especially through these 18 CDs. It's amazing. First and second sets, great sound. Joe LaBarbera and the young boy on bass. It's stunning. It's just brutal for a piano player to listen to. It felt like he was getting all his shit in before he died. That's what it felt like.
Was it the same core group of songs every time?
Presentation. You have your set.
Were you interested in his 12-tone tunes?
No. I was interested in his voicing.
So as a composer, not interested, but his comping is pretty remarkable too.
Depends.
What does that mean?
Someone sent me, I think it was the Jazz at the Plaza album at Newport with Miles with the sextet, and Bill was playing piano. Now I had that original album. I love that album, especially for Paul Chambers, the way he played on My Funny Valentine. It was just amazing. Anyway, I got a track from that wasn't on the original album. What was the question again? I'm sorry, I tend to get off these days.
What was Bill Evans doing in the Miles?
Oh yeah, okay. So he was playing his comping. He was being a bad boy. His comping did not fit in at all with what anybody was doing. He was really being bad boy, because I heard him comp with other people and be just unbelievably sensitive. But he was not behaving himself on that track, I have to tell you, on those tracks. It was just so obvious.
Was he bored?
Probably. Coltrane pissed the rhythm sections off a lot because he wouldn't stop playing. Coltrane
would stop playing?
He wouldn't.
Why?
because he was working shit out. Miles, he complained, you heard that story, he complained to Miles once. He said, Miles said, stop playing so long. He said, I can't help it. He says, take it out of your mouth. Take your horn out of your mouth. Wynton and Jimmy Cobb, he'd go on and on and on with sheets and sounds and all that stuff. Wynton would stop playing. And then he'd come in and he'd play some loud banging, comping for a little while to try to get Train's attention. You could hear all this signaling going on that Train was ignoring completely and just going for what he was going for. He was so committed to the sheets of sound thing, he was so committed to finding it. Something was pulling him in that direction. A neural network was pulling him in that direction. It was firing off signals to do the sheets of sound thing. He was going somewhere with that, and he wanted to follow it.
Well, how important was it that many of you guys were checking out Eastern philosophy and expanding your minds and your consciousness to become a better person and a better artist?
Well, I came up in the 60s, man. I did everything in the 60s you were supposed to do in the 60s.
Tell me about that, please.
Well, especially a lot of psychedelics. And I got to the point where I realized that's kind of personal. I don't know how much I want to talk about it.
That's fine.
But I came to the conclusion that things that look separate are an illusion, that everything is connected. The problem is we can't see the connection. There are no isolated events. Everything is connected. Everything is one. And I still believe that 100%. For instance, Mike, case in point, Mike Brecker always used to talk about time and tone, and I thought they were two different things until I realized they were two different aspects of the same thing. They weren't two different things. They were two aspects of one thing. And everything is connected. So it's a problem of stance. Where do you stand? What's your POV at the moment? You can change you can just take 2 steps to the left and your whole POV changes, right? At least visually.
Boulez called it freedom of orientation in the music.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. But
I like that idea.
Yeah, and so you can't, because we're not God, we only have our one single point of view, we have to shift points of views. Mm-hmm. So now I see everything. When I ever see two opposites, I always assume they're parts of a whole that I haven't discovered yet, and I'm just seeing two aspects of the whole idea. I'm absolutely convinced of that from my trips and everything. I mean, I felt the connection. I saw the connection. Everything is connected. It's only our ego that separates us from that. You could take it back to the Bible. To the first. If you can look at the Garden of Eden scenario as taking millennia to actually happen, right? But if it's basically a condensed version of billions of years. All right. So here we are in the Garden of Eden. What that means is no ego. We're like the animals. We are feeling part of everything. They don't feel separated from their realities. They're part of it. But then you came along and the frontal lobe grew larger and larger, and you started to question. And then the snake in the tree came along, and you bit of the apple, and that was it. You were kicked out of that frame of reference, and now you feel separated from nature.
But let me ask you,
that was God's penalty for eating the apple.
Understood. But you also have a quote on your website that I find very interesting, that the inner world is the greatest of frontiers. And is that just a form of extreme narcissism that we're witnessing, or is that something that's going to benefit the world?
Well, that's a good question. And I'll tell you, Most artists have to have big egos in order to carry out what they do.
You have to believe in yourself.
Yeah. Ask me that question again, because I got a better answer. Good.
Okay.
Ask me.
So what is the importance of going and searching the inner world of the artist?
You saw my lecture, You Are the Instrument?
Yes.
That's it. We spend our lives in a subjective state. That's the state we're in. Any artist, no matter what the art is, that we're living in subjective states. Now, one could say, well, you're egotist, you're always thinking about yourself, but we are the instrument. The piano's not the instrument, the saxophone's not the instrument. Everything that we are learning and training are internal processes that we're developing. So we are the instrument. And the subjective life of a musician is where we live. That's where we're doing all the work in the limbic system and the alligator brain. All that. That's the only part of the brain that can do make billions of decisions within a subdivision of a nanosecond. That's the part of the brain that does all the processing and where the intuition is, where fight or flight, friend or foe, all of that stuff. That's the basis of all art down there. That's where instinct, reaction time, intuition. When you get that little voice in your head as you're leaving the house and says, "Take your umbrella," and it's shining outside, and you say, "Nah," but your lower brain has been processing all this information, God knows where, and they sent up a little message to you. They knew something. Your intuition knows something you didn't know. So it's never wrong. That little voice is never wrong.
No, I know, Hal. I've had very serious intuitive events throughout my entire life, from childhood to now, because you plug into a certain thing. I mean, I feel like it's in for a penny, in for a pound. Like if you're in for creative exploration, you're going to this other area now where you're sort of toying with different energies and things that you know not much about.
Right.
And I can't help feeling there's always been, like, I'd dream a piece, write it down, and my trio could play it. And, my dream life and my intuitive life was something I was very comfortable with trading with in terms of what I thought was good stuff. Like pieces that you wrote in a trance, or pieces you don't remember writing, or, any intuitive event that happened playing music with people where you hit together, right? Where you're somehow linked psychically in a trio. Seems like trios do it best. I don't know about you, but I feel like three.
The more instruments, the less piano.
Well, that's true. And if you want a lot of piano, which I do, you have to definitely make sure there's a lot of piano that can be heard.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's when you're in the zone, right? When you can create and you can hear the cycles, and you can hear and predict things in a way, and hear into the future.
Yes.
And is that the same zone as composing?
Playing music, improvising and composing are all decision-making processes. A and B. That's all the brain has, A and B. That's it. So, for instance, if you listen to there are things that show up in the music. I'll tell you, I'm either going mad or I'm really onto something with this new book. But I forgot what I was going to say again. I have to apologize for that. I lose a train of thought too easy.
What are you working on these days, Hal Galper?
Not anything. I'm in a funny position because I don't have. I've done it all. I've done it, I think, well. And there's no place for me to go now. I've done it. I've done everything. And with Cubist and the Zone, I try to do anything, I'm going to be in competition with myself. Bill Evans talked about that. He says, I feel like I'm in competition with myself against the Vanguard album, or, and every album, the last album you made is always your most favorite. But Bill felt like he was in competition with himself all the time. Luckily, I don't have that. I'm not Bill Evans, and I never achieved the levels he did. So I ain't worried about that, But I there's no, I've done it all. I've written all kinds of music. I've played with so many masters, so many great musicians, and I really have no other place to go. So I don't know I have nothing to work with. I just getting my chops warmed up in case I got a gig, and I just go to the gig and I have some fun. Like that's what I usually do anyway. No preconceptions.
Is anything happening at the Deer Head anymore?
Yeah, they're doing some things. I didn't draw there, so they won't hire me anymore. I don't draw anywhere, but they don't hire me anymore.
Well, that doesn't make sense to me, Hal Galper. I think that you're a force in the music.
Yeah, but I don't draw.
And that doesn't mean that your shit isn't heavy, because it's certainly heavy on so many levels.
I don't take it as a reflection of my music. I take it as a reflection of my lack of marquee value, which I could care less.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I never cared about that. I never cared about getting a name. My ego doesn't need that. My ego's fine. I don't need that to feel good about myself.
Well, but guys like you really have had an impact on guys like me.
Really?
And that's something that time and time again, I see you in there with guys like Liebman and Randy Brecker and all of the different cats, from Free to the Bop guys to Electric. You've covered so much ground. I couldn't say it any better than you just did, but it's true. And all the different genres and all the different levels of control that you've explored throughout the music is what I'm doing on my little journey too.
Yeah.
Is because guys like you are like, this is what we do. We check out different levels of control, genre, feelings, emotions, right?
Right.
And you have to like experience the world that way. It changed my life in terms of how I experienced the world, because I wasn't interested in one thing.
Yeah.
Right. So the way you guys have done that has inspired me and so many other guys. I just want you to know that.
Oh,
and that's super important.
Well, the only opinion I care about are my peers' opinion. My ego likes that part of it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'm a historian, so like I know how things connect up, and I know so much of the stuff that you've done. When you heard my trio, you commented that we had similar interests in terms of how we were dealing with the time and dealing with subdivisions and rhythms and things.
Yeah.
And we didn't call it rubato. That was what you were calling it. And it turns out we were talking about the same type of thing, which for me is like I call it multi-tiered rhythm. So I really appreciate you taking the time to chat, Hal. It's really been a great pleasure, Hal.
Always a pleasure, man. Are we done?
Well, we certainly can be. I feel like we've covered a lot, and it's been very intense. It always is with you.
Well, at least I didn't spill any secrets.
No, well, I think you behaved very nicely. And people should go to www.halgalper.com, and you can find out all about the master there. There's a lot of great writings on there. I highly recommend checking out Hal's site for all kinds of great musical content. He is a consummate educator. He communicates very high concepts in a very down-to-earth way. So I highly recommend it. I'm learning all the time from Hal Galper. Professor, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, man. It's nice to hear that.
Well, You've put out so much there. I mean, we didn't even get into the concept of displacing rhythms, but I don't know, like how technical we can get here.
Well, let me
You've
tell
already
you.
covered it.
Let me tell you what I discovered. There's a thing called the tuplet machine. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. Somebody made a machine to be able to figure out how to do what we're doing. I never knew that, until I found it. We're playing tuplets,
It is tuplets. That's true. And how many big ones, how many little ones?
Yeah.
Yeah. And shape is huge.
Yes.
And
Shape
it's
is
so
primary.
funny.
Shape is primary. Before notes. I'm starting to write my section on shape because that goes at the top of the priorities. First priority, tone. Second priority, shape. No, tone, rhythm, shape, notes. Notes are last.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And shape, you can take a shape that you played on Sweet and Lovely, on the changes of Sweet and Lovely, and just transfer the shape to giant steps. You just have to match the notes to the changes. That's all. So a shape is transferable. It's like a universal meme,
Yeah.
that you can use anywhere. You can use it anywhere.
It's so true. And it drives pieces. For me, I have pieces that are so clearly based upon shape.
Yeah.
And you accept it because I don't know. Where I thought shape was cool was in Gradinger on the City of Glass, the Kenton. Do you know that stuff?
Yeah. Haven't heard it in decades. Yeah.
Do you remember hearing that and thinking about shapes?
No, I didn't get into thinking about shapes till I was working on the Coltrane.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always feel like the architecture.
Shapes and patterns. That's what Coltrane said in the interview. Shapes and patterns. That's what he practiced.
Oh, shapes and patterns, he said.
Yeah.
He didn't say cells, you
No,
said?
patterns.
Oh, cool.
That's some Train's playing.
Is that what Bach was doing?
Shape is very important in Bach. Shape has always been important. That's what keeps things interesting. And it's only A and B. It's either up or down. Right? I'll leave you with this, all right? And you can check it out for yourself about what creates the improvised event. All right. The brain is a pattern thing, correct? It looks for patterns. So if you play A and then play A again, the predictive part of the brain is expecting you to play A a third time. But if you play B after the first two A's, you disrupt the pattern. You create tension. The human body always seeks equilibrium no matter what happens to it. So this problem has to be solved, okay? So it's where the creative, so you improvise a solution to resolve that tension. Now you listen to the solos and you hear people go, AAP. It has some effect on the brain. I haven't figured it out yet. It's going to need a neurologist to figure it out. But by breaking the pattern and creating this tension, the brain has to find a solution, and it works within, I don't know if you're familiar with complex adaptive systems and all that stuff, but you'll see it in the book. That's how improvised, you'll listen to all the players now. When you listen to a record, how many times they do AAB. Once you do AA and you start B takes off somewhere else all the time. It's like a jumping board,
Well, and the importance of coming back to A can't be
you don't come back to A. You do some later on. You do two different A's and then a B. You listen to the records now. The beboppers, everybody does this. Even I was doing it, and I didn't know it. how could I be doing that? And I didn't know it. Well, something down there deep figured it out before I became aware of it. You know what I mean? We're down there in the limbic system. You know? So with A and B, you can come up with a lot of shit. They built the computer on A and B.
0, 1.
Yep. Yeah. So
Thanks, Hal.
All right, man.
So much to think about, and do listen to Hal Galper's music, because that's where it's all happening. All right. I'll be listening to it. I always go a deep dive. I can't get to all your stuff, Hal. There's too much stuff. I'm serious, man. All the stuff just with Cannonball and Phil, but all your original stuff, all your band. So halgalper.com. And we are here every week on Fridays with new episodes of the ProgCast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to my guest, who has been the great Hal Galper, elder statesman of the jazz music.
Mostly elder.
But statesman nonetheless. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. See you next time.